Hi, this is Unruly Anime, where we summarize anything related to anime. I hope you have fun viewing my anime recap. Let us go on to the first episode of this fantastic anime. The banished former hero lives as he pleases. A boy named Alan was unable to receive the gift of God's bounty and was called a failure. But his true identity was that of a former hero with memories and powers from his previous life. Fortunate to have been expelled from his duke's family, Alan was trying to start a free-spirited journey. But he encountered an assassination attempt by a former fiancée. An unwanted heroic saga begins for the former hero, who wants to relax in this world. The hero of this story sacrifices his own life for the sake of his people and makes a heartfelt request to the goddess at the moment of his reincarnation, causing her to get in tears with one of the tear droplets falling from the goddess's eyes to the hero's hands. The hero is reincarnated as a blue-haired, filthy, rich snob named Alan. It has been 15 years since the hero has been living the life of a duke's eldest son. And just like any other noble prince, Alan too has been lazing around all of his life. Alan's younger brother in this life calls for him, telling him that their father has been waiting for their presence downstairs. So Alan hurries up and gets ready to go down with his brother, no questions asked whatsoever. And on their way downstairs, he hears a lot of the complaints about himself from his younger brother, like how he is a total shut-in garbage who never touches grass and always spends his day in bed living comfortably. Alan's brother Brett keeps on ranting about how much he hates his incompetent older brother and expresses his desire to have been the only child born to his rich parents. Well, someone is giving off early villain vibes with their hopes of getting all of the family property. Anyway, Brett begins to laugh like a maniac all of a sudden, indicating that something ominous is about to happen. Unsurprisingly enough, Alan's father, Craig, who is the Duke of the House of Westfelt, summons Alan and calls him a total loser for not being able to level up in his 15 years of life, bringing shame to their almost royal family. Craig also mentions how low and ordinary Alan's statuses are. And not only that, but just like a screaming crybaby from some unpopular, overrated man, Alan appears to have no gift at all. Apparently every teenager in this world receives a blessing from the gods, and because Alan didn't receive any, he has brought unprecedented shame to his father. Because of his incompetence, Craig hesitates to call him just a disappointment to the family and hence decides to throw him out of the house, stripping him of his noble status. With that single command, Alan is kicked out of his noble family, but he doesn't get upset about it. Rather, he expresses his joy over it because he finally considers himself to be free. Alan first thanks his luck for not being stuck with this so-called red flag of a family for too long. Then he decides to begin looking for the peace he wanted so badly in his previous life, when he was a restless hero without a life. He begins to follow a beautiful butterfly towards where it is flying. Shortly after, he finds himself on the outskirts of his ex-father's dukedom and takes the decision to head to the borderland of the territory. As he keeps on walking into the unknown, he finds himself fishing beside a river for food, hoping that he could live a simple, ordinary life like a commoner. After walking a few miles, Alan looks in the far distance from a small mountain peak and notices from that crazy amount of distance that a young female knight is being harassed by a regenerative demonic beast. The knight, named Beatrice, finds herself in a dire situation, as no matter how many times she slices through the demonic beasts, they just regenerate back into one piece. Beatrice reveals that she was on her way with Princess Rhys to escort her when these mysterious beasts suddenly attacked their carriage. Since it is a knight's duty to protect the weak from evil, Beatrice decides to sacrifice herself in order to save Princess Rhys, and requests that she run away for her life while she keeps them busy. Rhys doesn't want to be the heartless wench who will just leave someone behind to die. But Beatrice reminds her how important her life is compared to that of a mere knight. Meanwhile, Alan observes the battle from a far distance and, upon taking a closer look, uses his magical powers that he shouldn't have since he is level 1. According to his father, he figures out that the person who is being attacked by these demonic beasts is the first princess of this kingdom. Alan, who knows Rhys, already states that, just like him in this life, she too has been neglected by the people around her, as all of them consider her to be a failure. To make it worse, they even dared to compare her with Alan. Rhys always tolerated people criticizing her, but when they mocked Alan, she retaliated, as she always considered Alan to be a praiseworthy man. So to repay Rhys for her kindness towards him, Alan decides to use a bit of his powers for once, revealing that he still has all of his God-gifted powers from his previous life as a hero. But before he can reach the two girls, one of the demonic beasts lands a perfect hit on Beatrice and takes her down at that very moment. Alan charges up, his lightning speed not copied from the Flash, and quite literally teleports in front of Reese, who has accepted her imminent death. Thankfully for her, Alan swiftly defeats all of the demonic beasts with one strike by attacking their menors, saving the day. He doesn't stop flexing his godly powers there, and he saves Beatrice from dying by using his healing light magic on her, restoring her wounded body in the blink of an eye. Reese asks Alan what type of sorcery he is using, but because he cannot simply tell them that he is just using the powers he inherited from his previous life, he goes with the lie that it is the blessing that he received from the gods recently. The two girls believe his lie and move on to the main topic, explaining what they are doing in the Borderlands. Apparently Reese received the divine revelation a few days ago, and she was on her way to a village named Clum in the Borderlands. Because Alan has nothing better to do because he is now a familyless bum, he decides to go to the village where the two girls are heading and fix their carriage for them using his healing light magic. On their way, he tells Reese how badly his father Craig has treated him, and hearing his sad story, she sympathizes with him. 3 hours later, they reach Clum Village, which they find to be suspiciously quiet. Beatrice notices that although there are so many houses in the village, none of the doors are open, prompting her to believe that no one lives here anymore. Reese assumes that the mysterious monsters from the Borderlands must have attacked the villagers and caused ruin in the village. However, Alan believes otherwise, as he claims to have felt no sense of the presence of any monsters when he scanned the surrounding area, using his presence detection magic. The group eventually finds a gathering of the villagers in front of a house on the far side of the village, where an old man kicks out a girl who is a flat ladder than the brains of flat earthers. Upon taking a proper look at the girl named Akira, who clearly has no melons and hence should not be considered a woman, Reese immediately recognizes her to be the light that she was told about in the revelation. Akira doesn't recognize who Reese is, so Reese reminds her of the day when they met at the royal capital and became so greatly acquainted that they even shared meals together. Akira apologizes for forgetting who Reese is and makes up with her, promising that she won't forget her existence again. Alan asks Reese what she meant earlier when she claimed that Akira was the light. To explain it, Beatrice first tells Alan about the special blessing called Braver, which grants its user the power of 1,000 warriors, making the bearer a hero, and because Akira is the only one with such a gift, that makes her the hero of this generation. Reese, who got a revelation that advised her to become a guide for the light and clearly away from the darkness, interpreted the message such that she needed to be beside the hero of the world, explaining what she was doing in the Borderlands. The group gathers at a nearby bar to eat lunch, where the hero Akira tells him about her current mission here, which is to slay a dragon. According to her story, when Akira was passing from the road nearby to this village, she came across a scared little girl who begged for her help, telling her that the villagers were forcefully taking her to the dragon as a sacrifice. So to investigate the matter further, Akira came here to talk to the old village chief. When she got kicked out of his house and ran into Alan's group, Alan instantly realized that the villagers must be trying to offer the little girl as a sacrifice to the dragon in order to receive its protection. He also realizes that the villagers are resorting to something very inhumane, just to protect themselves from monsters. Yet he stopped Akira from slaying the dragon because that would only cause the villagers to get into more trouble. Still, Akira chooses to help the little girl instead of pleasing the heartless villagers, and she sets out to get her task over with Reese. And Beatrice also decides to help Akira accomplish her goal. So Alan decides to accompany them as well, because, just like I said before, he has nothing better to do in his boring life. He explains it better himself, stating that he cannot live in peace knowing that his precious friends are in danger. In no time, the group reaches the mountain where the dragon supposedly resides. But before heading into battle, Akira stops them to have a strategic plan. First, she sits down on the ground, prompting others to come up with ideas that will help them defeat the dragon. She presents everyone with her own idea, saying that she will be going to head for the peak of the mountain using the main road, while the other three will circle around from the backside to take the dragon by surprise. Alan offers to be on the front lines with Akira, as he knows that he is much stronger than her. However, Akira refuses to go with that idea because she knows that Alan will just solo the entire operation and take all of the fun for himself. Alan doesn't understand how she got such a good read on him when they were not acquainted for even a day. So Akira explains that she can sense an aura coming from him that is not an ordinary person's. With Alan's silence, Akira confirms that Alan is hiding his power. Therefore, she becomes excited and asks him to have a sparring match with her. Once they get done with taking down the dragon, according to Akira's original plan, they initiate their operation. Akira enthusiastically takes her leave first with a huge smile, giving off the vibe that she will be able to defeat the dragon on her own. On the other hand, Alan, Reese, and Beatrice make their own route towards the peak of the mountain by climbing heavy boulders and making sure that the dragon doesn't become aware of their presence. While Akira confronts the red giant dragon, Alan figures out that the villagers must have been forced by his father, Craig, the Duke of Westfelt, to sacrifice their children. Alan assumes that the Duke is borrowing the powers of this mighty dragon by giving it human sacrifices, and that is why the royal knights of the kingdom haven't subdued such a dangerous beast yet. Akira begins the battle by using a brutal lightning strike spell on the dragon, which fails to make a single scratch on it, making her realize that defeating the dragon won't be an easy task. Moreover, she also discovers the little girl who she saved earlier to be laying nearby, making her realize that it was the dragon's cruel ploy all along to attract a strong prey to play with. However, the dragon becomes disappointed upon seeing how weak the hero Akira is and finds it laughable that a weakling like her is considered to be a hero. Akira accepts her death upon acknowledging the huge strength gap between them. But Alan doesn't let her die at the hands of the poorly drawn dragon, knocking it down with one small slash, showing how easy it is for him to use his ultimate skill, the end of the world. Alan charges towards the dragon, which is supposedly the closest being to God, and stabs right through its mana core, putting an end to its immortal life. Immediately as their battle ends, the dull blade of Alan breaks apart, as does the dream of living a peaceful life. But he accepts it for now because he now has friends who care for him, not only because of his strength. Alan wakes up next to Reese and apologizes for oversleeping. Reese reassures him that it's probably due to the dragon battle exhausting him and causing him to sleep a lot. Alan then asks about the other girls, and Reese looks over to see them, training vigorously and filled with energy, as Lizzie is about to apologize to him. Alan remembers Reese using her healing magic on people in need. He reminds her of a woman who used to travel to heal any illness or injury considered a saintly miracle worker, and how rumors about her revolved around Reese. Reese apologizes for not telling him before, and Alan takes her hands, telling her not to blame herself and affirming that whether she's a princess or a saint, she'll always be Reese to him. This deeply touches Reese, and she is very happy with his words. Then one of the girls calls out to Alan to spar with her. Alan gets up and goes to join them. The scene shifts to Alan bidding farewell to Akira, who asks him to take her with them to the nearest village. Akira mentions her dislike for carriages, preferring walking, and the little girl hugs her, asking Reese if she's sure she wants to take care of her. Akira explains that she's attached to the little girl and wants to take her on her journey, especially since the girl has no family and doesn't want to return to the village. Akira apologizes to Alan about her sword, but he assures her it didn't break because of her. It was his duty to defeat the dragon, but he couldn't have done it without her help. He emphasizes that the extraordinary sword she possesses was meant to be with her. Alan tells Akira that it was impossible to defeat the dragon without her, and the true hero for the little girl is Akira. Akira decides to leave with the little girl and bids farewell to Alan and his friends. The scene then shifts to the palace, where we see Craig discussing the defeat of the Red Dragon King. He mentions that their plan was to lure the heroine and eliminate her. His assistant informs him that the saint had provided some assistance to the girl, which angers Craig. Brett, another boy, expresses frustration, saying they should have just let the clay wolves deal with them. He suggests sending a massive herd next time to ensure their eradication. Craig tells him to calm down, mentioning that with a Red Dragon King defeated, they can't afford to lose more magical creatures. Brett argues that at this rate, they'll allow the heroine and the saint to escape. Sprague's father intervenes, saying that as long as they're in border areas, they'll have many opportunities to kill them. He then asks the assistant if he has found the location of the elves. The assistant replies that he's searching for it and will send the elf's head soon. Craig laughs, vowing revenge on the kingdom. The scene transitions back to Alan and the girls. Alan asks Reese if she knows a blacksmith who can make him a sword. Reese mentions a blacksmith named Elvira who lives nearby in a town called Granholm. Beatrix adds that she knows a blacksmith named Elf, who is highly skilled but eccentric. Reese apologizes to Alan for involving him and everything, but Alan thanks her, saying he should be grateful in this case. He then asks if she wants to return to the capital as a princess, but Reese says no because Beatrix is with her and they've contacted her father with no issues at all. Later in the night, in a secluded part of the forest, we see them without any lights. Alan uses his magical powers to start a fire, delighting the girls. They gather around the fire, and Reese falls asleep on Alan's leg, but quickly wakes up and apologizes. Beatrix laughs and tells them that since they are engaged, there's no harm in her sleeping beside him. This angers Reese, who informs Beatrix that Alan is her ex-fiancé. Alan interjects, saying there's no problem with her sleeping beside him. Reese gets angry and tells Alan that she objects, surprising him with her words. After some time passes, we see the two girls asleep. Alan speaks to himself, saying that spending time like this is wonderful. I don't think I've ever experienced this in my recreated life in this world. We first met on a beautiful night under the moonlight, exactly like tonight. He then reminisces about the past when he was at the palace, and Alan appears behind him, commenting on the beauty of the moon. Reese introduces herself as Risa Dustiller, expressing her desire to get to know him because she was informed that they were engaged. This surprises Alan greatly. And then we return to reality, where Alan says the peaceful life I longed for may be something like this. The scene transitions to the morning in my grand hometown, where everyone is in the market. Alan remarks on how lively the town is in a way one couldn't imagine. Beatrix informs him that adventurers and wanderers with special circumstances gather there, specifically because the town is on the border. Our heroes arrive at the blacksmith's house, and Reese is confident that the blacksmith will craft a perfect sword for him. Beatrix finds this very strange, as usually they hear the sound of swords clashing even from this distance. But this lady only cares about making swords and couldn't have gone anywhere else. Alan goes to the door of the house and tells them it's open, so they enter and find many powerful weapons. Alan comments that these weapons are much better than his broken sword. Suddenly, they hear Reese scream, and they rush to her to find Noelle on the ground. Beatrix holds her, explaining that this is her usual state. She falls asleep from exhaustion due to overwork. Then we see Reese using her healing magic to wake her up, and Alan asks her if she uses her magic every time to cure her fatigue. Reese informs Alan that yes, she did forget that because it's been a long time since she last used her magic. Beatrix adds that when Noelle starts making a new sword, she neither eats nor drinks until it's finished. For Noelle wakes up not having seen Reese and Beatrix for a while and asks about the boy Alan. Beatrix explains that he works as a personal guard for Reese Sommer and goes by the name Alan. Noelle then asks if they want her to make a new sword for him. She explains that she couldn't do that because she has received many orders and is very busy at the moment. Additionally, he already has a sword, albeit a broken one. Ellen shows her the broken sword, and Noelle examines it, realizing that it has been used to its maximum potential. Wondering how someone could achieve that, she changes her mind and decides to make him a new sword. She asks if he's interested in having a sword that surpasses his broken one. Matrix clarifies if she means a sword made specifically for a hero that only a true hero can wield. And Noelle confirms, saying she will make a sword that surpasses any sword here, but it requires tremendous effort. And until now she hasn't found anyone capable of wielding such a sword except Alan. Alan agrees, unable to refuse, and Noelle tells them she will start making it immediately and then kicks them out of her house. Closing the door, she remembers the woman, Vanessa, who used to work as a blacksmith, and says that no matter the cost, she must make a sword that surpasses a supernaturally strong sword. Next, we see Alan with the girls in the forest. Reese expresses her wish that Noelle doesn't do anything reckless. Alan tells them they should find an end to stay in until the sword is finished. Suddenly, the girl, Morlina, appears and says that this must be reported. Then we see her talking to Horace, expressing that Reese's presence here is very good. But according to Westfield's information, Reese's personal guard should be a male knight. So who is the other boy with them? Referring to Alan, Horace tells her they must investigate. Beatrice tells him to take a rest, then suggests to Reese that Alan should go to the Adventurers Guild since they have some free time. The materials he obtained from the dragon could be sold for a huge amount. Alan confirms that they are right, since he has been without money since being expelled by his family. He asks the girls what they will do, and Lizzie tells him that she will stroll around the town with Beatrice for a while. Alan gets up, bids them farewell, and leaves. Beatrice then talks to Reese, asking if she's sure about this plan, as the two of them alone won't be able to handle it. Reese acknowledges that, but doesn't want to involve Alan more than necessary. The scene shifts to the Adventurers Guild, where the receptionist welcomes Alan. He expresses his intention to trade some materials for money. The receptionist examines the items he has, and when she opens the bag, she is surprised to find a dragon scale, which is very valuable, along with a bag full of other items. She takes the items and goes to inform the manager. We then see the girl, Meline, and her assistant, Alan. The assistant asks about the dragon, and Alan says he doesn't mind but wants to know who they are. Horace introduces himself and Meline, mentioning that she is an Amazon and not commonly seen in this kingdom. Despite their appearance, they are not knowledgeable enough about adventure stories, so they travel to hear from adventurers. Horace asks Alan if he acquired the dragon scale alone or with allies. Alan explains that he couldn't defeat it alone. Horace asks if the heroine was with him, assuming that the battle must have been very exciting. The receptionist then apologizes to Alan for the delay and explains that she finished evaluating the items, so it's time for the exchange. Horace and Moline leave, and we see them talking together. Horace tells Moline that it was necessary to see Alan to assess his abilities, but she never expected him to be a failure without a divine gift, indicating that he is a completely trivial opponent. The scene shifts back to Alan and the girls at Noelle's house. He asks if the sword has been made yet, but is surprised to find that Noelle is sleeping again. Reese uses her magic to wake her up, and Noelle apologizes for the delay, informing them that she has finished making it. Then everyone looks at the sword and is amazed. Noelle informs them that it's the best sword she has ever made. Alan takes it and tells her that it's incredibly impressive. Noelle suggests that they go try it out, but Reese says they will do so. After she fully recovers, the scene shifts to Alan and Noelle in the forest, where he tells her he can test it alone. However, Noelle insists on seeing him use it in front of her because the sword might need some adjustments to fit him better. Alan asks why she became a blacksmith and started making swords. Noelle asks him if it's strange to see an elf as a blacksmith. Alan replies that, considering talent and specific traits, dwarves are more suitable for such work. They pause, and Noelle tells him that she was raised by a dwarf and remembers her past, where she didn't know where she was born or who her parents were, ending up in a strange place. Then a lady named Vanessa took her in and took care of her a lot, bringing her back to reality. She tells Alan that Vanessa was a very rough and stubborn lady who didn't teach her anything about sword making, but she remains her dear teacher. Suddenly she gets emotional, tells him that her personal past doesn't matter at all, and walks away abruptly. Then Horace appears with Moline and asks Alan if he went out to hunt monsters at the guild's request. Alan confirms this, and Horace tells him to inform them about his hunting trip. When he returns, Noelle calls for Alan to come to her, and Horace and Moline leave. Noelle is very surprised to see Horace, but he doesn't pay much attention. Then we see Horace telling Moline to track Alan and investigate him, because if he finds out, it will be a big problem for them. Then Moline disappears, and the scene shifts back to Alan, who is testing the sword by killing many monsters. He tells Noelle that he loves the sword very much. Noelle takes the sword from him and uses her magical power, enhancing the sword's strength and sharpness. She can see the condition of the sword that others can't see with the naked eye. The sword's speed and positioning can be increased by her magic. She tells him that he used the sword without it getting scratched, showing his skill. She wants to see him fight stronger monsters and takes him deeper into the forest. A night falls, and their fire is still blazing. Noelle is surprised because usually many monsters come to attack, but now there are no monsters. It's possible they fled because they were afraid of facing Alan. Noelle expresses her fear, remembering her mentor Vanessa, who told her to run if she ever encountered such a giant monster. She urges Alan to use his sword to attack the sleeping monster, shouting loudly. Noelle remembers her past with her teacher Vanessa, where she used to work a lot, and Noelle tells her that she's hungry and asks her when she'll stop working. But Vanessa never answers her, which angers Noelle. At night, Noelle comes to her again and tells her that she ate everything in her house completely. Then she looks at the weapons Vanessa makes, and Noelle asks her how she uses these tools. But Vanessa, as usual, doesn't respond and continues working, which frustrates Noelle a lot. Then she asks her what her problem is. Then Noelle goes to the weapons and picks up that sword, but it's too heavy. She can't carry it, and she falls to the ground. Yet Vanessa never notices her and continues working, which angers Noelle again, and she says to kick the wooden box. Then Noelle sits in front of Vanessa and asks her what's enjoyable about hitting the sword all this time, and that she will collapse someday because she works all the time without eating or drinking. She gets upset and tells her that she's foolish, but there's no use with Vanessa as she keeps working and doesn't answer. Her morning comes, and Vanessa is still working. Then Noelle wakes up and finds Vanessa has made a very powerful sword, and Noelle is amazed by that. Then the scene shifts to the present time, where we see Alan with Noelle in the forest, and she tells him to use that sword against that monster and kill it. Alan tells her that he has no reason to kill that monster, and it didn't attack them in the first place as it's sleeping far away from humans and hasn't harmed anyone. He doesn't understand her reason for wanting to kill it, but he won't join her in this revenge. Then she takes the sword from him, and as she runs towards the monster to kill it, Alan tells her that it's better not to do that because this monster seems to be a Fenrir, as it has a barrier that nullifies any attack. But only elite weapons like sacred swords can penetrate that barrier. Noelle tells him that this sword is stronger than the sacred swords, so Alan tells her that this sword won't even get a scratch, as she hasn't yet made any swords that surpass the sacred swords. But if she still wants to strike the monster, nothing will stop her. Then the scene shifts to Alan with the girls, and they are surprised to find such a monster in the forest. Alan tells them that he believes someone brought it to this forest, and it seemed as if it was covered with some kind of power. Beatrice asks what this monster is doing and what its goal is. Alan tells her that there's no conclusive evidence for that, so it's better to be cautious about it. Then he asks Reese if she's finished with her work and what she's doing, because surely she didn't come here just to make a sword for him. Lizzie tells him that she hasn't been able to hide it from him yet, and informs him that about 3 months ago the military commander named Cyril, one of their strongest men, was assassinated, and the perpetrator who took Cyril's head and fled is unknown. Various investigations were used at the crime scene, but no significant evidence was found. So most likely the one behind this crime is a demon, and they are using unknown powers against them. Alan asks her if it's possible for a human to assassinate a demon, as they never care about political conflicts. Beatrice tells him that someone from the kingdom must have allied with the demon and exploited their powers. Reese tells him that they came to this town, where all kinds of people gather in search of a clue. Alan tells them that he doesn't know who's responsible, but he met a suspicious person. Then the scene shifts to Millie standing in front of the monster and wondering how to break that barrier and what force did that. Then she goes to her partner and asks her how things went, and she tells her that she has no news to report to him. He tells her that no matter how long they stay in the town, they won't find anything interesting there, and he orders her to go and kill the Saint Annie elf. Millie is surprised, and he looks at her and tells her not to tell him that the Amazon warrior, who loves fighting, doesn't care about seeing blood. He puts his hands on her shoulder and tells her that he wants to hear her consent. Millie tells him that she will do it. Then the scene shifts to Noelle, still working and hammering the sword, remembering Alan's words when he told her that the sword is still weak, but according to its polishing method, he believes that it will become capable of striking the Fenrir, but it must be improved. But she must ensure not to use any reckless methods. She returns to reality and says that she can still continue working, as she must do so. Then she gets tired, leaves the hammer, faints, and remembers the past when this monster attacked Vanessa. And Horace appears and tells Vanessa that he knows she's a talented blacksmith. And this causes them a big problem because they don't allow an increase in the number of strong swords competing with the sacred swords. Vanessa attacks the monster with her sword, but when she tries to strike it, the fiery barrier appears and breaks her sword, and the monster kills her in front of No Way. When the monster attempts to attack Noelle to kill her, the magical lightning appears and prevents it. Akira, the heroine, appears and attacks the monster with her sword, killing it. Horace informs her that he will withdraw for the time being and disappears. Then Noelle approaches Vanessa, and Akira tells her that she will heal her wounds. Noelle asks Akira how she managed to attack the monster so easily and why Vanessa's sword wasn't enough to kill it, and then she cries. Then we return to reality, and Noelle wakes up, starts hammering on the sword, finishes her work, and the sword becomes ready. Then she goes out to the forest carrying the sword, says sorry to Alan that she will use his sword for some time, and enters the forest. She finds the monster asleep, and as she tries to kill it with the sword, the monster wakes up and uses its power to knock her to the ground. Suddenly, Horace appears and asks her if she has the ability to stand after taking a hit from Fenrir. as he has been looking for her for a long time and didn't expect her to be in the border areas. He asks her if she will work for him because he heard that she possesses a special power, and leaving her to become a meal for Fenrir would be a waste. Noelle is surprised by his words and asks him about this special power she has. Horus tells her that her eyes, the sovereign fairy eyes, are one of the only 5 known innate gifts in this world, and she possesses one of them, which allows her to bond with others under his command. Noelle asks if he means that Amazon, who used to stand by Vanessa and Horus, tells her that she lost her home and has no shelter left, so he kept her close to him even though he was the one who destroyed her place. Then he laughs and asks her about her opinion on joining him because he doesn't see it as a bad idea at all. Noelle tells him that she prefers to die rather than become his servant and wishes him to suffer and die quickly. Then Horus orders the monster to kill Noelle, and as the monster moves towards her to kill her, suddenly Alan appears and attacks the monster. Horus realizes he underestimated his abilities, but wonders if it's normal for him to leave his original position and come here to save Noelle. Alan asks him about his intention, and Horus tells him that if he hurts Princess Rhys, it would be unfavorable as he will delay his rescue. Then we see Millie walking into Rhys's room, entering her bed chamber and uncovering the bedding, but she doesn't find Rhys in her bed. Suddenly, Rhys and Beatrice appear behind her, and Millie asks them how they can see her. Then we return to Alan, and he tells Horus that he means the Amazon girl who hides her presence. He felt something suspicious about them, so he placed a barrier to cancel the invisibility barrier within Rhys's range. He's been subjected to such tricks a lot in his previous life, to the extent that he's tired of them. Goris tells him that his words are incomprehensible, but even if he tries to reveal them, he won't be able to prevent them from killing Rhys. Then we return to Rhys, and Millie attacks them with the sword, but Beatrice stops her, and while she tries to kill them, Rhys orders her to stop. Millie strikes Beatrice and knocks her to the ground, then grabs Rhys and puts the sword to her head. Beatrice gets up and hits Millie, causing her to faint. Then we return to Alan, and he tells Horus that it seems the girls don't need help as they defeated Millie, so the assassination attempt has failed. Horus tells him that he is still the one in control here, and this is an undeniable fact because, without a sacred sword, he cannot cause any harm to Fenrir. Then Horus orders Fenrir to attack Alan and kill him. The monster attacks Alan, so Alan counterattacks and kills the monster, which surprises Horus greatly, and he says this is impossible. Then he disappears. Alan carries Noelle on his back and returns with her. While walking, he says that Noelle fell asleep because she stayed up all night making the sword. When he arrives home, he finds Lizzie and approaches her, asking about Noelle's condition. Alan tells her that she's fine, just sleeping. Then Noelle wakes up and gets angry at him, asking why he's carrying her without her permission, and hits him to make him put her down. The next morning, we see Millie tied to a chair, and Alan tells her that he has already investigated the traces of that man's gift and asks her to speak freely because if she insists on silence, they will never understand her situation. Beatrice suggests sending her to the capital to stand trial before the court. Rhys tells them that she doesn't think Millie is a bad person, as she didn't attempt to assassinate her willingly, and it's likely that she has a family waiting for her return. Millie tells them that she doesn't have a family and nowhere to go, as her entire place was burned down. Then Noelle remembers the past, when Vanessa saved her when she had nowhere to go. She asks her where they will go, and Vanessa tells her they will go home. Noelle feels reassured and goes to sleep. Then we return to reality, and Noelle cuts the ropes tied to Millie and asks her if she'd like to go to her home with her. Everyone is surprised by Noelle's action, and she tells them that she will take care of Millie. Beatrice warns her that Millie might try to kill Rhys again, but Noelle assures them that she will take care of her, and if she tries anything, she will stop her. Millie looks at her, deeply moved, and cries. Rhys asks her if she's all right, and Beatrice apologizes to her for her harsh words. Alan smiles and says that one of the problems has been solved. Then Alan goes out to the forest and reaches the place where Fenrir was. He breaks the barrier, and the scene shifts to Horus, who is sitting alone pondering over Alan's power and wonders who Alan exactly is and how he possesses such power. Suddenly, the storm appears, splitting the ground, and Horus falls. This strange monster appears before him and kills Horus, then disappears suddenly. When Alan arrives at Horus's location, he finds him dead. Then the scene shifts to the palace, where we find the monster that killed Horus, informing Craig and his son that he killed Horus before he leaked any information. Craig says it was supposed to happen before these powers extended their reach. His son tells him that it's now difficult to eliminate the saint and the elf, and all he did was take the head of one military leader. This angers the monster, and he tells them that he will kill the saint, and the elf and the leader ask his son to pray for the death of the archbishop. He looks at his father and asks him if he's confident about this decision. Princess Reese is traveling with her uncle and the royal entourage when suddenly they are attacked by ugly flying monsters. The guards with tin bucket helmets are no match for the powerful monsters. Reese's uncle asks her to stay in the carriage while he rushes out to help fight off these monsters. Reese looks around to find numerous monsters snacking on her bodyguards when one of the monsters decides to say hi to her and breaks the glass, sending her flying below the seat. With no way to protect herself, she can only scream. The monster peeps inside to see what the fuss is all about when it screams in pain as the uncle stabs it in the back. But the monster refuses to go down without a fight and turns to rip the uncle's abdomen, spilling his guts out. He looks one last time at his niece before he's taken by the monster who tries to eat him alive. But his thick metal armor prevents the monster's sharp teeth from piercing it. The uncle uses his remaining strength to stab the monster one more time, resulting in both falling into the river at the bottom of a steep cliff. Reese freezes in fear and stays like that. At present, Alan, Reese, and Beatrice walk into a peaceful village. The villagers are busy preparing for the Returning Spirits Festival, in which they welcome the spirits of their departed ancestors. Despite being the most armored and huge in size, Beatrice is the only one who clutches her sword tightly. Scared, another villager joins in and explains there is nothing to worry about, as all they do is dress up as ghosts and dance. Beatrice let out a chuckle, trying to cover up her embarrassment. Just then, Reese asks the villagers if they know someone who wears silver armor, as she had heard a description of someone like that in the village. The villagers look confused and apologize, as they don't know any such person. Reese is disappointed, unable to find her mystery man, and Beatrice wonders if such a man's existence is just a rumor. Alan remembers that during their search, they were still at Noel's house. The Adventure Guild also didn't have any information. Noel remembers hearing from a regular client of hers, who was also an adventurer, about a ghost that appears in a certain village, supposedly from the royal family. Suddenly, Noel's demeanor changes, and she talks about a ghost bearing a grudge born of the royal family's oppression. He wears silver armor splattered with blood and walks through the graveyard night after night. Beatrice is annoyed at this preposterous explanation when a loud thud rumbles the entire place. Beatrice is the first to jump and scream like a 6-year-old girl. She soon realizes she is the only one screaming and stops to cough, but we all know she cannot redeem herself from the embarrassment. While she frantically tries to explain that she's not scared, Reese contemplates for some time before suggesting they should go to this village and investigate. Everybody looks surprised, and Alan states that they cannot disregard the possibility that the royal family might know how to raise the dead. Because of this, they are currently visiting this village. Alan reminds them that Noel had mentioned a graveyard and suggests they check out the cemetery. The three venture into the spooky-looking cemetery. It is getting dark, and Beatrice is not taking any chances, so she draws out her sword. They hear the rustling of the bushes from behind. Startling them, they turn to find a man with no irises standing in a daze. They immediately recognize him as the man they had talked to earlier. The man brings them to the village headman's house so they can ask him some questions. Alan asks what he was doing at the cemetery. The man replies that he was passing by when he saw them there, so he decided to stop by. He talks in an animated way and soon takes his leave. The trio sits down with the village headman, who tells them they haven't heard any rumors of a ghost with silver armor. He offers them his house to stay at for the night, as the next day is the festival. That night, Reese dreams of her uncle, who was a father figure to her and would often call him father. She remembers how he told her that in every situation, believing in people is the most important thing, as that belief becomes a connection that links them together. Reese wakes up with an epiphany and walks to the window, where she sees a knight in silver armor. She calls out to him, thinking he is her uncle, and follows him to the graveyard, where suddenly it becomes a scene from The Walking Dead as the bodies crawl out of their graves and ominously proceed toward Reese. Reese does what she does best. She screams. She's suddenly woken up by Alan, who came to check on her after he heard her screaming. It seemed like she was having a nightmare. Realizing it was all a dream, she hugs Alan. The next morning, people gather before sunrise, dressed in all sorts of Halloween costumes, and dance around a huge bonfire. Meanwhile, the trio keeps their distance, baffled by how the villagers are celebrating the dead, which would otherwise be considered taboo in their kingdom. Alan mockingly states that, as a knight of the realm, why doesn't she put a stop to it? Beatrice is quick to report that since it isn't causing problems for anyone, it is fine. Alan notices Reese looking stressed, but doesn't say anything. Just then, the man from before approaches them and encourages them to dance. Reese politely declines, saying she would like to rest, but encourages Alan and Beatrice to enjoy themselves. Alan uses his ultra X-ray magic eyes to see for any lurking danger. After making sure it is safe, he runs to join, and Beatrice follows. Meanwhile, Reese stays there but soon gets a whiff of something, and someone calls her name. She turns to see a knight in silver armor walking away amidst the villagers dressed as ghosts. She immediately rushes, passing through the crowd into the jungle. She gets the smell again and looks up to find her uncle standing in the distance. The smell is emanating from him, which happens if you don't take a shower for days. He says that coming after him like this on her own is dangerous. She calls him father, and he reminds her he's her uncle. She tells him that after he went missing, a search operation was put into action, but he couldn't be found. She asks what he has been doing all this while he admits he has been resenting the royal family. He hid from the royal family so he could take revenge because Rhys's father was trying to get rid of her. He elaborates that the king is targeting the lives of those who possess inborn gifts. They include the people who possess the power to vanquish the dragon, the power to create unparalleled weapons, the power to double the strength of the soldiers and bring glory to the nation, the power to read any gift, and finally, the power to rise as a saint. Since these powers individually have the potential to destroy the kingdom, Rhys's father thinks that these people, with powers known as the puppets of gods, are said to wreak havoc at the behest of the gods. Uncle extends his hand, says he wants to save Rhys, and asks her to join him in defeating his brother. Rhys, however, refuses and says that she believes that if they can talk, they can come to an understanding, repeating what he had told her once about believing in others. Suddenly, Uncle starts levitating and smiling menacingly. He declares that her corpse won't go to waste. With that, he unsheathes his sword and strikes her, but his attack is thwarted by Alan, who arrives right on time to block the attack. Uncle recognizes Alan Rhys is good for nothing. Ex-fiancé Alan demands that he return Uncle Alfred to them. Alan uses a parallel paradox spell break on the uncle. Suddenly, the spell strings control Uncle break, and Uncle comes back to his senses. However, he asked them to stay away and declared that he was already dead. He repents of saying all those things to Rhys and regrets attacking her, even if it was not at his own will. He clarifies that it is not the king, but the demon. However, his grudge against the bloodline is real because, since his childhood, sick people and jealous people have tried to create a rift between the two brothers. He hated the fetters that came with being a royal, which made him abandon his position and start again from scratch. That's how he became vice-captain of the Premier Knight Squadron. He admits Rhys was the only one who brought him happiness. He turns to Alan and asks him to take care of Rhys for him. He adds that she is a good girl, but also reckless. Alan admits that was his plan all along. Satisfied, he asks Alan to spar with him one last time. Alan gladly agrees against Rhys's protests. Alan stops Rhys and explains that Uncle is entrusting him with Rhys, so he wants to make sure he's worthy of keeping his promise. Uncle praises Alan for his intelligence and warns him that at that moment he is not a corpse but a man, a knight, and a father. They start fighting and show exceptional skills. Mid-fight, Uncle reminds Alan that it is the returning spirit festival when the living and the dead mingle. A dream of a single night, a chance to dance with those who shall never return. The two men are on par, and as they continue to fight, Rhys remembers another memory with her uncle. She is asked if he's really strong and if he'll protect her from scary monsters. Her uncle had promised to protect her until someone stronger than him appeared. She cries, and it soon starts raining, as if the clouds are crying with her. It is time for Uncle to go. By the way he's lying on the ground, it appears he lost the match. He apologizes for upsetting Rhys, but admits he is feeling at ease now that he knows she will be protected. He also admits feeling joy every time she calls her father. He would try putting on a brave face every time she did that, but he knows how difficult it was not to show how happy he was. Rhys holds his hand and says she loves him, calling him father one last time with a weak voice. Uncle asks Lyde to find happiness, and then he passes away again. Rhys cries bitterly. They both return to the village, and it soon stops raining. Alan stands deep in thought when the village headman joins him, and asks when he noticed Alan. The matter of faculty states that he has known since the beginning that people in the village are dead, and that he is controlling them. The headman asks why Alan didn't interfere. Alan admits that the dead may live among the living in the village, but the place is peaceful. The headman reveals he is also a demon, but Alan isn't bothered and states that assuming every demon is evil just because they are demons is just naivety. Just then, zombies once again make an entry from the ground and walk towards him, and Alan realizes whatever he said might not apply to them after all. The headman wants Alan as his pawn and thus sends corpses to overpower him. Alan uses his magic to break the bonds and neutralize the demon's control over the undead. Alan isn't done yet and has unsheathed his blade. He uses World End 2 with one stroke and slices the demon and the corpses into half, finally providing them a way to pass on. The demon leaves a crystal behind, which Alan keeps. Meanwhile, at the royal palace, the king and Brett are not happy that their pawn, the demon, failed, even after lending him their help. Kurt reminds Brett that letting a girl's escape wouldn't hinder their plan. They already have the archbishop's head in their hands. Rhys, Alan, and Beatrice start on another journey, and Beatrice promises that as a knight, she will always be by her side. This makes Rhys happy, and she thanks her for being so supportive. Alan looks at the crystal he collected and realizes it is Brett. He also realizes that the uncle had his head placed on the general's body, who had lost his head. Suddenly, Reese's high-tech hologram is producing makeup box glows. She opens it to find a message stating that General Cyril has returned, shocking everybody. Brett remembers the day he lost his mom and his father lost the light in his eyes. His father looked back at him without any friendly emotion, and Brett was terrified of him. He approached his father one day, trying to show him a pretty rock, but his father's response was so cold that Brett couldn't help but feel bad. His father called him a failure, and he was surprised by his father's outburst. He overheard the maids making fun of him, so he decided to run over to his safe spot to let out his feelings. His brother came over to try and offer him solace, but he rejected it during their later years. He thought his brother was making fun of him, just like his father did. His father called him a failure of a son, but he realized that he wasn't a failure. He suddenly wakes up, but he's infuriated that his dream reminded him of his brutal past. He gets off his bed, and he proceeds to the throne room to greet his father. But his father just laughs at a message he just received. He tells Brett that they can now begin their revenge on the kingdom and the gods who brought them misfortune. As he incinerates the kingdom, Brett realizes he's the only one worthy and capable of ruling the kingdom. The citizens of the kingdom gossip amongst themselves, and Captain Edward and Clark, his soldier patrolling the streets, get wind of this. They realize that the rumor of General Cyril coming back to life has the citizens on edge. Clark is worried that the rumor is spreading so quickly, and Captain Edward thinks it's a deliberate action meant to incite the people. Clark wonders if Captain Edward thinks the general is an imposter. Captain Edward informs him that he doesn't care if the general is an imposter or a ghost, and he reminds Clark that their squadron must stop anyone from bringing harm to the kingdom. He reminds Clark that if General Cyril were still alive, that is what he would do. He decides that they need to uphold his will and his absence, and Clark agrees with him. As they resume their patrol, they walk into an alleyway, and suddenly a hooded figure comes out of an adjacent alleyway. Clark draws his sword, wondering who's trying to attack them, but the person draws back the hood, and Captain Edward recognizes the Archbishop. He wonders what the Archbishop is doing in such a place without an escort, and the Archbishop informs him that there's some information he has for only his ears. The Archbishop asks Captain Edward to tag along with him, and after a moment of hesitation, Captain Edward agrees. Clark is surprised that Captain Edward wants to go with the bishop alone, but the captain reassures him that he won't be harmed since he's not going into battle. He informs Clark that their top priority is gathering information, but Clark still doesn't want him to go with the Archbishop alone. Captain Edward reassures him once again that he shouldn't worry because he'll be back in one piece. He asks Clark to look after everyone in his absence, and he follows the Archbishop down the alley. Clark watches emotionally as the captain departs, and after some time, the Archbishop informs Captain Edward that they've arrived at their location. The captain is surprised that the Archbishop took him to the training ground, and he wonders why he took him to such a place. The Archbishop informs him that he's performed his role, and he suddenly disappears. Captain Edward looks around but can't find anyone. Craig suddenly appears behind him, and he's about to perform a backstab, but Captain Edward senses his presence, and he draws his sword in time to defend himself. Captain Edwards commends Craig's effort to catch him unawares, but he informs him that it's impossible because of his extreme bloodlust. Craig is glad to see that Captain Edward hasn't changed, but Captain Edward isn't surprised that Craig would start a sparring session without prior notice to his sparring partner. Captain Edwards realizes that he hasn't seen Craig face to face since his wife's burial, and he wonders why he suddenly wants to meet him under such suspicious conditions. Craig informs him that he's foolish because he didn't realize that the Archbishop now belongs to them. Captain Edward wonders what he means, but Craig doesn't give him time to think about it. Craig attacks him, but he brings up his sword to block the attack, wondering what Craig has done to the Archbishop. Craig felt nostalgic because he remembered the number of times they'd crossed swords just like this. He informs Captain Edward that unlike their previous sparring sessions, he no longer needs the sword, which surprises the captain. Brett is riding on a carriage, and he remembers his mother's burial that day. That day, he asked Alan why their mother was sleeping, and Alan informed him that it was because she had lost her life. Brett wondered why she lost her life, and Alan told him that it was because everyone eventually loses their lives. Brett was shedding tears to mourn their mother, and Alan held his hand to try and comfort him, but it wasn't much solace. Alan found out that Brett couldn't sleep, but Brett asked him what a failure was. Alan wondered why he wanted to know the meaning, and Brett asked him if he thought he was a failure. Alan informed him that he didn't think so, and he told him not to think about people's trivial judgments about him. Brett told him he was lying, but Alan told him that he wasn't lying. Brett informs him that he's a liar because their father called him a failure. Some years later, Craig commended Brett for becoming strong because he didn't expect him to be the first to become so powerful. He accepted Brett as his true son, but he turned back to Alan and told him to get lost because he was a failure. Though Brett was sad for Alan that he was addressed as a failure, he took solace in his father's approval of him when they were teens. Brett was angry at Alan for accepting failure as his name, but Alan congratulated him because his hard work had paid off. Brett was pissed because Alan always acted like nothing was wrong, even when people said something bad about him. He decided that Alan wasn't fit to inherit the Westbelt name, so he took himself as the heir. Alan was confident that Brett would do well as the heir of the family, but he advised him not to choose the wrong path. Brett comes out of his reminiscence, and he wonders why he was remembering past events. The demon appears to him to inform him that things are going as planned. He asks Brett how things are going on his side, and Brett tells him that he was able to lure Edward into his trap using the Archbishop as a pawn. The demon was pissed that Captain Edward had the gift to nullify other gifts within a 1-meter radius, which made him practically invincible on the battlefield. The demon was sure that he would interfere with their plan, which would be troublesome, but Brett assures him that Craig will handle Captain Edward. Brett informs the demon that he can put their plan into motion with his special ability, without worrying about Edward's ability. Brett wondered if things would work out on the demon's end, because all his previous attempts had failed. Another demon appears to inform the demon that the hero has appeared. The demons decide to go with the Premier Knight Squadron, while they lend Brett some of their strength so he doesn't screw up. Brett promises there will be no mistake on his end this time because he's no longer a failure. Akira tells Sarah to stick close to her so she doesn't get lost in the crowd, and Sarah decides to hang on tight to her. Akira tells Sarah she will never leave her behind, so she holds onto her hand so she feels safe. She promises to take Sarah to a place where she can stay in peace once things settle down. Akira leads Sarah through the crowd without noticing a demon stalking them through the crowd. She goes to a secluded place and asks the demons how long they plan to keep playing hide and seek. The demons finally manifest, and Akira lets them know that their bloodlust gave them away. The demons are glad because it makes it easier for them to take her out, but she's confident that they can't take her down. The demons admit that they wouldn't have been able to take her down if only she was alone. Akira wonders if they will attack a little girl, but the demon informs her that she's getting the wrong idea. The demon activates the magic sigil on Sarah, and he informs Akira that everyone from that village has a sigil just like Sarah. He wonders if she'll stand by the child while she explodes, or if she'll run for her life. After he informs her that Sarah will explode, if he hits Sarah with a fireball, the demons wonder what the hero will do as Sarah pushes her away, hoping she runs away. Akira refuses to run away because a hero should never run away, and the demons release their fireball spell. The knights notice that Clark is looking pale, and he informs them that he's worried about Edward. The knights reassure him that Edward will be fine, but a demon suddenly appears. Clark tells the knights not to attack because he knows they can't win against the demon, and he wonders what he should do in such a dire situation. The demon admits that he doesn't bear any animosity toward them, and decides to tell them the truth of the world. Meanwhile, the Archbishop and General Cyril stand on a balcony to deliver a speech to the people. Brett is controlling the general behind the scenes as he tells the people he's about to reveal the truth of the world to them. The Archbishop informs them that they were lied to because their gifts are not blessings that should be celebrated. The Archbishop informs them that they are slaves of the gods because their gifts were imposed on them instead of their freedom of choice. He's pissed that the gods control them like puppets, but he informs them that the only way they can free themselves is to give up their gifts. The Archbishop tells them to liberate themselves by doing away with the gods, but the people are hesitant because of the abilities their gifts grant them. General Cyril invites Brett to the balcony to clear any doubt the people have, and he walks out on the balcony. He points out a sorcerer's dragon that will be a huge asset to them. General Cyril informs the people that the life form has the strength of 1,000 soldiers with no weaknesses, and the people believe him because they tested its abilities. The people wonder if the single life form will be able to make up for their abilities, and Brett informs them that his marionette power will make up for that. The Archbishop explains that the marionette draws out latent abilities that will make the people stronger than ever. The Archbishop also tells them that the gifts the marionette draws out will be gifts they're already familiar with, which they will use to usher themselves into a new world. The people slowly see the benefits of Brett's power, and they wonder what will happen when Brett passes on. Brett informs them that, though they can't use gifts anymore, there will be more assets they can trust. The people wonder what he's talking about until a demon suddenly appears and takes off its hood to reveal its appearance. The people are surprised to see a demon, and Brett admits their surprise is justified, but he assures them that they formed a cooperative relationship with the demons. The Archbishop informs them that they are only able to learn the truth to the demons. He promises that the demons will lend them the abilities they can use to replace their ghosts. And Brett encourages them to join hands with the demons so they can live as they wish. The people cheer for Brett, and he takes in every ounce of their praise. Meanwhile, Edward is still engaged with Craig, who manages to hurt him with his sword. Craig wonders why Edward hasn't given up when it has been clear for a while that he'll lose the fight. Edward figures out that he can't defeat Craig because he has a high level, and Craig informs him that levels are more important than skills because an increase in level leads to an increase in spirit. This leads to the creation of a superior being powerful enough to take down gods. Clark learns the truth, but he tells the demons they're knights, and they'll stop anyone who wants to bring harm to their kingdom. The demon suddenly becomes invincible, takes down some knights, and hurts Clark. He reappears, but Clark is still defiant and hell-bent on defending his nation, which surprises the demon. The demon concludes that he's a fool, and Henriette walks in on them, telling the demon they have to be foolish to become knights and protect their country blindly. Craig takes down Edward, and he tries to get back up, but Edward warns him to stay down. The demon comes in, and Craig wonders if he's taken down the demon. Akira removes the demon disguise, and Craig wonders how she's still alive. She recalls how she was saved because Alan undid Sarah's sigil, and she wonders how much Alan knows about what's going on. Meanwhile, Brett is taking in the people's praise. When Alan suddenly calls out to him, Brett wonders what the failure is doing in front of him. I appreciate you viewing my anime recap, Unruly Family. Please let me know what you think about the Banished former hero lives as he pleases by liking, sharing, subscribing, and leaving a comment.